Goodness. We own several businesses between us, so we can't work Zoom.
It's scary, isn't it?
So embarrassing.
So, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining Charlotte and I with this HR How to Manage Employee Grievances. My name is David Hudson and I run the HR department. And Charlotte, who's going to be leading the webinar and will introduce herself shortly, is the owner and runs the HR department Coventry. So thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you. We are recording the webinar so that we can send it out to you, just to share with you the points that we're going to be covering today. So during the webinar, we're going to identify and address common reasons for grievances. We're going to look at legal responsibilities for grievances, why it's so important to handle them properly, how to respond.
Employee grievances and
Oh, someone's not on mute. If you wouldn't mind muting, thank you. And finally, we're going to answer your questions. So our HR how-tos, just to set the scene for you, is they're very snappy, very practical, maximum 20-minute explanation. So we have 10 good minutes at the end where Charlotte will answer any questions that you have. So please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll moderate through that, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte to introduce herself and get us going.
Thanks, David. So I'm Charlotte Sherritt. I own and run the HR department Coventry up in the Midlands. Some of you may have come to the previous webinar we did, which was dismissals, which was an hour long. And you may have, if you were there for that one, you'll know I like to talk a lot. So this one is a lot shorter. It's 20 minutes and David has been tasked with keeping me on track. Like he said, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat as we're going along, or we've allocated a solid 10 minutes at the end to go through any questions. So if you've got specifics or you want me to cover something again, please feel free to just ask those questions when we get to the end part. So we're going to cover grievances on a very whistle-stop tour today. So what are the top reasons for grievances in your organisation? We normally do this as a bit of an experience share, David. I don't know if for time saving, it might be better if we just kind of talk about it, or if I just talk about it. So the easy way to think about the difference between kind of grievances and disciplinaries, because they kind of live in similar areas, they follow a similar structure, is that a disciplinary would be something where the organisation has an issue or a concern with the employee. And then a grievance is almost on the flip, where the employee has an issue with the organisation, or more likely with people within the organisation. So quite often they come up sometimes in parallel. So if somebody's doing somebody's part of the disciplinary process, they may well raise a grievance because they are unhappy with the way that the organisation is doing things. And again, more specifically, the way the manager or the HR person is doing things. Oh, there we go. So what is a grievance? So we always want to be, we always live by the ACAS code of practice, gives us good, really practical advice. Talks about that they are concerns, problems, or complaints that the employee raises. Anyone can raise them at any time. So, somebody may have just started with the organisation and have a grievance that they wish to raise. We always want to try and deal with them informally first, but that is a right that they have kind of from day one. And again, ACAS gives us those nice kind of structure, the same as the disciplinary, of how we deal with it, how we handle it, how it is progressed as a formal complaint. Lovely. So top causes for grievance. This is what we would have done in the little breakout bit. But again, I'm a talker, so we're not going to have had time for that. But I'm not going to go through all of them. But I think probably the biggest ones that you will come across, and that I come across from my clients, are things like issues with the manager. My manager's picking on me. My manager's being unfair to me. My manager is, doing X, Y, and Z. Generally, that comes from the manager putting a bit of pressure. We get a lot of grievances that stem out of, capability or performance management issues. Sometimes you have got people who, if they've been with an organisation a long time and they aren't used to having the feedback, will quite often push back and raise a grievance because, you know, all of a sudden things are a problem that were never a problem. There are some more serious ones in there, things like duty of care and working conditions. So what I would say is, if you get something through that is more along those lines, you really should be dealing with them as a grievance, because if we don't deal with them, we don't listen to them, those kind of things can become whistleblowing claims. And there is a lot more protection for employees, especially around things like health and safety, which would come under working conditions, duty of care, that sort of stuff. There is a lot more protection for whistleblowing. And it may be that, even if this person is a problem person, it may be very difficult to remove them from the business if they have been making whistleblowing claims, because they have that extra layer of protection. So that's always one to watch out for. But generally, it's going to be clashes of personality, not getting along with other employees, not getting along with their manager, I think, are the big ones.
What are you finding, Charlotte, are the most common reasons that you get from your clients at the moment of grievances? What's the number one reason?
That's a tricky one. That is a tricky one. I think number one is probably the performance management stuff, where we are kind of asking and expecting certain things from our employees, and then they're not delivering for whatever reason. And sometimes, we talked a little about it on the dismissal webinars. Sometimes we don't want those awkward conversations, and grievances can be a little bit like this. Is when we get to the point of grievance, we've almost gone too far, because there'll be warning signs beforehand. Somebody will have talked to you about these things. Hopefully they'll have spoken to you about them, with a hope that things will be changed or things will be improved. And generally, if we can get it there at that informal stage without having to go through invites and formal meetings and note takers and stuff, it's so much better. So much better. If somebody's got, okay, we'll take contractual changes at the bottom. If somebody's being asked to change their working hours slightly, because needs of the business, we need to change it, we've got a right to do that. It's not a huge change, it's totally within it. They just don't want to change. Now, if we have those conversations with them and we deal with that appropriately, we listen to them, we understand their reasonings, hopefully we can come to a solution. If we just bulldoze it through, they're more likely to raise a grievance, and then we've got to go through the whole process to get through it, just to do something that could have been just a conversation with somebody.
Interesting. We're finding that the most common reason from amongst our clients accepting that things go in peaks and troughs, but race discrimination at the moment is the number one reason. We have a good number of those grievances that we either have just finished dealing with or are dealing with. So grievances aligned to the protected characteristics seem to be on the rise. So there's certainly something for people to look out for.
There we go. So ACAS code of practice. So these are things, they are not, I always tell people, they are not the law as such. They are things that we should do. They are best practice. They will be looked on, if you follow them, they'll be looked on very, very favorably by a tribunal should it come to that. But they are not all of it is a hard and fast you must do. So there are certain rights that, things like the right to be accompanied, that's sort of by a union rep or an employee, that sort of thing. But actually some of it is up to you as an organization. So some organizations have set deadlines for when they want people to apply, and a bit like an appeal, or when they want to give an outcome. Those things are up to you. So organizations quite typically have, if you put your grievance letter in on a Monday, we'll get back to you within 5 working days with what will happen, that sort of thing. It's not necessarily within the ACAS code, but some places like to have that structure, and so that employees kind of know what to expect.
Sometimes I find clients are a little reluctant to follow what seems like big old processes, and they just want to get stuff done, which is fair. What's the benefit? When we talk to clients, what do you tell them the benefit of using the ACAS code is?
The benefit is, it is a useful structure, especially if you're not used to dealing with stuff like this. The ACAS website is very helpful of breaking it down. What do you need to do? What processes should you be following, especially if you've never had to deal with a grievance before? I mean, obviously, we'd like you to have HR support, such as the HR department, or other providers are available. But if you haven't got that, or if you're in a standalone role, then ACAS gives you a nice kind of breakdown of what you should be doing and when. And should the worst happen, should things break down so badly that you end up at tribunal, if you have followed the ACAS code, then that means that you can justify that you have followed a fair and reasonable process. And that's really all we can do is stick by the same rules for everybody and same structure for everybody and treat everyone fairly. Lovely. So how to respond to grievances. So this goes back a little bit to what we talked about earlier. So the first part of it is always formal or informal. Some employees will raise something, and by the time they've raised it in writing, it's it's at like level 10, and it definitely is a formal process. However, some people might come to you and they're using the words grievance, but actually what they want is more just a bit of a moan and a groan, and maybe you to kind of help them figure out some solutions. So that's what we would call the kind of informal stage. And I am a big fan of getting things done at the informal stage, because that is so much nicer, it's so much easier. The second we start having to do invites and get note takers, it feels very harsh, and it feels in a weird way, even though this is the person raising the grievance, it can feel a bit like a punishment to them. And some people find it very, very stressful to go through. And because there needs to be, for the most part, investigations and follow-ups, and it is a process, there is a lot, there is a lot to it. It can feel very difficult for people. It's not unusual recently for people to go off sick having raised a grievance because the stress has just got too much. So if we can get to the actual point of doing a grievance and holding that meeting, the key thing that you want from it is, yes, listen to the person. Look, we follow all the seen, heard, and recognized. Always great tips. What you want, though, is that second column, a resolution, because you could do the most perfect investigation and actually not uphold anything, and the person's going to be really dissatisfied and potentially appeal and potentially raise more grievances, because actually you've not solved the problem for them, you've not provided any outcome, you've not made any recommendations. So it's really important to understand from people what outcome they want, because I don't know about you, David, but over the course of the last few years, quite often what people want is, I don't like my line manager, I think they should be sacked because they're being mean to me, but for pushing me and giving me targets, and I don't like it. Yeah. And it's like, well, that resolution is not likely to be happening, because unless something really awful has happened, we're very unlikely to be firing people based off a grievance. I don't know about you, it's very rare that a grievance ends in a termination.
Yeah, agree. But you raise a good point there. We were talking earlier about a grievance that we're dealing with where the employee is legitimately unwell. Can we ask employees to attend grievance meetings whilst they're out sick?
Yeah, so we obviously need to be sensitive with it, and we need to be sensible with it. I would generally say, if somebody's been, raised a grievance and they go off sick, I give them the week, see at what point that they are at. If they're still off, and especially if it's potentially linked to the grievance, then there's absolutely no reason why we can't write to them and say, look, we get it, you don't want me, he's coming to the office, but could we do this over Teams? Could we have a phone call? Do you want to kind of give me extra, or can I ask some questions in writing and email them to you to try and move things forward? Because until we hear the grievance and start the process rolling, it's just kind of dangling in the air, and having that kind of dread hanging over you can be quite stressful for employees. So as long as we're sensitive, yes, we can hold meetings while they're still out sick.
That's good to know. Thank you.
There we go. I was going to say, our last little slide was, if anybody wants any help with investigations, we have got a cheeky little podcast that has got some tips and tricks on how to hold investigations, because once you've heard the grievance, you'll need to investigate. So yeah, make sure you have a look at that if you've not. So how to respond to concerns that are being raised by your employees. So this, again, all of these things, recognizing the signs, the environment, talk to people, listening, support, all of this is the informal stuff. So I'd like to think, you work very closely with people, you get to know them, you get to realize when they're not satisfied or when they're disappointed, or, when something's clearly bothering them. And you need to use that as a bit of a gift, really, because you know your people. You know, we get a lot of calls that say, oh, you know, I think this and I think that. What do you think? And I'm like, you know your person. You know your person better than I do. You'll know what works. If you think going in with a hard formal process is the thing, then do that. If you think it actually can be resolved over a cup of coffee in a neutral environment, then do that. You know, things are always better when we do it outside of the process, before we have to start a process, not outside of a process, before we start a process. Thank you. So legal action. So this is you know, you've done the grievance and, you know, things have gone a little bit south with everything. So this is the kind of the process that they can go through. So they raise the grievance, you hear it, for whatever reason you don't uphold it, there's an appeal process. They can either then resign and claim unfair dismissal, because, you know, they feel that and then they've also got the option to claim constructive dismissal. So those are kind of two slightly different things. So unfair dismissal is, you know, if it was part of a process, for example, if they were in a disciplinary process and they were dismissed, they could then claim the unfair dismissal based off the back of the grievances. They could just be so unhappy that they want to resign anyway and claim constructive dismissal. Now, constructive dismissal is where you made the work environment so awful that they had no option but to quit. And that was quite difficult because the employee needs to prove it. There's also the old favourite, which is claiming for disability discrimination, or, as David said earlier, any protected characteristics at the moment seem to be very common themes that we're seeing. So these are the three things that employees can claim for. Obviously, if they're under 2 years service currently, they can't claim for unfair dismissal or constructive dismissal, but anybody from like pre-employment can claim for discrimination based on the Equality Act. So just something to think about with that.
One of the things we're seeing, I don't know if you're seeing similar, is that people are going to ACAS more quickly to raise claims.
Yeah.
How does that work then? If I'm employed by you, for example, and I don't raise a grievance, but I go to ACAS, what typically happens there?
Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual one. We used to see it was just, oh my God, I'm just conscious of time as well. It used to be that people would quit and then go to ACAS. But now what we're seeing is people actually go into ACAS kind of in this awkward middle part. And what it does is it can be useful because ACAS are, you know, a professional body. They're able to give advice of sorts. They are particularly able to give, you know, advice on it, you know, if a process should be happening or if this should be raised as a grievance. But the problem with going to ACAS is it almost kind of neuters what we can do as an employer, because actually what's within our gift is to hear a grievance and investigate it and deal with it. Whereas if you're just going to go straight to ACAS, it's kind of that option is taken away from us. So it's kind of a good and a bad. I think it's hard to backtrack from going to ACAS, is what I will say. Once you've kind of done it, it's done. So here we go. So this one is just some internal resources. So what we talked about, informal and knowing your people. These are all some brilliant things that we can do before we get to a grievance stage. And hopefully these are the things that, you know, if you've got them in place, hopefully they help reduce the number of grievances. If you haven't got these things in place, it's something to think about, not necessarily as a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to somebody raising a grievance, but actually, would it help kind of put a stopper in it? So things like an EAP program are fantastic because they generally come with counselling services, other professional bodies that the employee is able to tap into. And it might be that the employee's got issues outside of work that are affecting them in work, and then the effect in work is that it's ruining the kind of interpersonal relationships. So having that neutral party that they can talk to, you know, quite a lot of them have, like I said, counselling sessions, financial stuff, all sorts. So always really useful. There we go. And then, oh, is that one for you or one for me?
Yeah, just for me, really just covering what you said. You must have good HR support. There's no reason, you know, why you should go through these things on your own. And I know lots of people are trying to deal with these at the moment. So we do provide various assistance, as Charlotte says, also included within which we can provide the resources. So I skated through that, Charlotte, because I know we want to give people the chance
I
to.
talk too much. I'm really sorry. I completely lied
No,
that I would be
no,
quick.
it's been very interesting.
Okay.
It's a big
We,
topic.
we did the
Um,
dismissal one and it was an hour long, and I was like, this is not enough time. And a grievance again, because they're so multifaceted. They're like snowflakes. No two are ever the same that you'll come across. So
yeah,
this is just real broad hints and tips.
yeah, it was very good. So on that then, we've deliberately stopped here because we want to give people the chance to ask questions or clarification. We do incidentally, we are both available separately if you want one-to-ones, if you've got particular live issues you want to talk to us about. Our details will be in the follow-up email, but please do use the chat. I'm just looking at the screen. No one's quite popped through yet. So yeah, do share any questions. There's no silly questions. It is a difficult area. So what do you find, Charlotte, is the most common question with grievances when your clients ring you?
Um, oh, that is a good question, actually. What is the most common thing? Um, if I'm totally brutally honest, quite often it's, do I have to deal with this? Can I not just have a chat with them? And what I would always say is if somebody has gone to the trouble, especially if they've gone to the trouble of writing quite a lengthy email or letter, it needs more than just a thumbs up emoji on Teams or something. It's even if this person doesn't want to raise it formally, it whenever I'm trying to word this so it's politically correct, whenever I see several paragraphs and they tend to get a bit ranty towards the end, somebody is peed off, somebody is not happy with something, somebody is either upset or annoyed or feels hard done by, and they may not be right, they may not be correct, but their feelings, they're feeling their feelings, they got big feelings like a toddler, they got big feelings going on. So we need to agree, yeah, that's totally valid. I can see you are feeling that way. This is how we see things, and try and be kind of, it's easy to buy into the kind of drama and the kind of anger or kind of upset of it, especially if it's a small business. Like so many SMEs, there's only a few of you in the team. And if one person has raised a grievance against somebody else and there's only another 4 of you in the team, it's bound to cause ripples and it's bound to cause problems. And it can, especially, we've had some recently where actually the MD has been the person that the grievance is raised about. And that can feel very personal because that's the person running the organization, that's the person leading things. And actually, if somebody's got a problem with you, does that mean they've got a problem with the organization as a whole? Does it, it feels suddenly very personal very quickly, and it can be very tempting to respond with similar emotion. And that's why it's quite useful to have somebody like myself or David who can, first of all, I haven't got a horse in the race, so I can look at it objectively from both sides. And also just to kind of take a step back and take a breath and go, okay, what do we actually need to do, rather than just being upset and in those feelings, because 2 people at heightened emotions are not going to come to an amicable solution.
Great. So whilst we
Sorry.
wait some more questions, just really thinking about what to do next. So if you are in that space, as Charlotte says, pick up the phone and talk to us. Otherwise, what you do need to do is make sure you've got the right documentation in place. Charlotte's talked about the ACAS Code of Conduct, for example, which should be underwriting the procedures that you have, and make sure you've got good HR advice, particularly if people are claiming that there's been a discrimination of one of the protected characteristics. Shameless sales plug at the end, as always, but just to let you know that we are here. We cover a huge amount of services. We are essentially your outsourced HR provider. So our main service is the monthly retained HR advice line service, through which we provide you with all of the great advice you've heard from Charlotte and so much more. And that's also underwritten by an employment tribunal insurance. So given that we see at the moment they're up by about 15%, it's certainly a very worthwhile, valuable, and dare I say cost-effective way to help you deal within tribunals, which will cost typically between £20,000 to £25,000 all in. We can help with difficult conversations, but also we can help with training managers to do the same, and everything in between. So do talk to us. We have slots in our diaries that as you've seen, we're both super happy to chat. That's what we do best. So do get in contact with us if you want to chat, and also if you want an audit. So we're offering free audits at the moment. If you want a health check on where your business is at, then contact us and we will be happy to do that. So again, I rushed through that because I just want to make sure people have got the time to ask any questions. We've had nothing come through just as yet, which means you did a brilliant job, Charlotte.
Yeah, I've sold it. Nobody has any further questions. We know everything about grievances.
Everyone is a master now of how to deal with
Yeah,
grievance.
a quick 20 minutes.
Yeah. We will also be following up, so we will send you a link to the recording and some other helpful and free resources for you to use. I think
one last thing is we are running these as a series, so the HR how-tos. Our next one is going to be how to take on your first employee, which is in April, 16th of April. Then 21st of May, how to deal with conflict. Then we're doing medical conditions, recruiting the best people, all the way through to August with dealing with short and long-term absences. So if you want to hear more of David and I chatting away and hopefully learn something, then yeah, please sign up to our free webinars.
great. Okay.
Also, it stops us having to talk to each other.
Which we do too much of.
Too sad if we're just sat in a Zoom call with just the two of us. So please come.
We could spend all day chatting, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you, Charlotte. That was really, really informative. Thank you for that. I think we're done. Please feel free to ask questions. Otherwise, we're finished and we will drop you the recording after the event. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day today.
Thank you.